Wind power is a piece of it, and I think the bulk of wind power energy, by far, is going to come from those offshore turbine fields that are 20 miles offshore and out of sight of land. They are not going to be land-based.
Let's take a question back here.
I want to follow up a different thread. Representative King, not King, but Kent, you mentioned about bringing this war home. The reason we're in Iraq right now is it's cheaper than building windmills. It's cheaper to get the energy that way. So we bring this war home, how are we going to afford these windmills? Think about it, it's going to cost more. So that gets to the sort of the energy return on these windmills, and we're looking at, I mean, Governor King talked about how electricity demand is going to double. What happens if that doesn't happen? How are we going to pay for these new Leaf cars? We're looking at the whole economic situation crashing all around us. I personally think that's going to continue to crash because, in part, of energy, and energy being so expensive. Energy is only going to get more expensive if we have windmills. So then I'm thinking down the road, when are we going to be bailing out these windmill companies? And who's going to pay for that? So I really want to know that how the financing of all of this works and how secure that financing is.
Lynn Williams, we haven't heard from you for a while. Go ahead, Peter.
I think Chris asked.
Yeah, I know, but I'm keeping track here, and you're kind of falling behind in the...
I have no idea where you got your figures from, and I might argue with that building turbine fields cost more than the war that we've been carrying on. I also think that when we think in terms of the cost of energy, that and I think Jonathan mentioned briefly the cost of different types of energy, that we do get oil quite cheaply now, and that's why it's so attractive. But I think we also have to realize that the cost of our oil is heavily subsidized by the federal government in the way, just in those wars that we carry on. That is a subsidy. We are protecting our energy interests with these wars.
The National Priorities Project did a study called the military cost of securing energy. And with several different formulas, they came up with a figure of $100 billion, which is a third of what we spend on the military just in fiscal year 2009.
I'll just briefly bring up one more thing, and there was a hearing today. Governor King and I were both there. He was on the hot seat and I was just observing. There's also the issue that was raised today, and I've always considered this a very serious issue because I lived for many years in California and we have hundreds, if not thousands, of abandoned turbines out there. Dead turbines just standing there. So there's always the issue here of decommissioning. And I won't get into the whole BEP thing, but essentially, well, you have to assure your financial capacity over the next 7, 15, 20 years. I'm an attorney, and to me, the only way you can ensure your financial capacity is to take out a bond to ensure that that money's there if you go belly up.
Hi, my name is Mary Beth Sullivan, and I live in Bath, Maine. Since we've been talking about war, I just want to put out that the United States, our #1 industrial export, the one thing that we build better than any other country in the world, quote unquote, are weapons. Our nation, in the 1980s, when the Soviet Union fell and other nations decided to use their military budgets for other things like renewable energies, as in Denmark, we went ahead and decided how we were going to be fighting wars well into the 21st century. And so now we've perfected, because we put our science and technology and finances behind the ideas, we can now have a young man sitting in a trailer in the desert of Arizona, killing, dropping bombs over in Afghanistan. So this country, when it has the will to do something, it finds a way. So my question for Angus King and for anyone else up there, how do we communicate to the congressional delegation from the state of Maine that it's completely unacceptable that the bulk of our discretionary budget is going to continue to build military so that we will be, they're sort of creating an infrastructure for how we're going to be fighting wars in the year 2020, 2050, instead of those resources really need to be put into creating the alternative energy infrastructure. So how do we wrestle those dollars away and communicate to the congressional delegation what we really want to be doing with our resources?
I want to do something a little different because there's a whole lot of hands up out here. And so I want to take about 5 comments from the audience in a row. You all can take notes, and then we'll kind of go through and let you each respond to whichever ones you'd like to, okay? Yeah.
Thanks, Bruce. Hello? Can you hear me? Let me stand up. I guess my comment is inspired by something Lynn Williams mentioned. I must say I'm strongly in favor of wind power, and always have been. And the question to me comes down to who controls it. And it seems to me that I'm sort of sick and tired of energy projects that are centralized, they're too big, and escape the control of every citizen. And I'd like to see or hear, Angus, I really appreciate the fact that you're here tonight. I think it's really courageous in your part, and also very helpful to us. And I always long to, I know one discussion I had with you a long time ago, it was on a certain similar thing. And it's to do with, partly it has to do with out-of-state money coming in, but it has more to do with big projects that get out there and up there. And I'm really sick and tired of CMP. Though they really managed to do a great job and so on, but nevertheless, and the grid and so on. But it seems to me that what we have is, and I think Lynn put her finger on it, a kind of industrialized version of energy production. And I would really like us to see communities produce that energy and control it. And I wondered what your comment on that would be by contrast, and whether your approach could accommodate itself to that a little bit more.
A woman back here anywhere? Any women want to speak?
I guess I want to make a small comment, particularly directed to Angus. Angus, you always talk about oil, saving oils with your windmills. If we look at the chart produced by the PUC in 2007, as far as the source of fuel used in Maine to produce electricity, 50% of the electricity produced in Maine is produced with natural gas, and the other 50% is produced with biomass and hydropower. When you went around Roxbury trying to cajole those poor people who have now shoveled about $25,000 to defend themselves against your project, you used oil as a reason to be a good citizen and to build a turbine. We've worked hard with the senior policy advisor of Balaji administration to tell them that was not a good argument. And interestingly enough, over about a year of our discussion, the argument has changed. We no longer are saving oil by having windmills, but we are going to actually increase the use of electricity in order to justify windmills. This conversation I followed up because I was one of the founders of the Citizen Task Force, and I'd like you to explain to us how the argument went from oil into increased electrical consumption.